Okay, so if you have your box, and again, you're going to be filling in your notes as you go, so you can turn off the video, you can pause it and go back and forth between two windows, or if you like working in the side-by-side windows, you can do that as well. Okay, our first pattern is called enumeration and listing. And you're going to fill in the red in the box. It's the blank spot, and you're going to fill it in with the part that's red here. So the purpose of the passage is to list or describe specific points or examples about a topic. When you look at the term enumeration or listing, you understand what listing is. It's going to list points or characteristics or something about a topic. And the word enumeration, I hope you recognize that root, N-U-N. It looks like numbers. You're going to number or list. So it's going to be a number of things that list or describe about a topic. Okay, let's see if we can see an example here. Mummies of humans and other animals have been found throughout the world. And this is in your second column. Some have been preserved by nature because of unusual conditions, while others are cultural traditions to preserve the dead. There are more than 1,000 mummies in China and over 1 million found in Egypt. Many of these are cats. Okay, here's our topic. Mummies of humans and other animals have been found throughout the world. That's your topic sentence. So we're looking for, we knew this is enumeration or listing, so I guess we're looking for facts about, a list of facts about these mummies around the world. Okay? Some have been preserved by nature because of unusual conditions. Okay, there's one fact about mummies throughout the world. Others are cultural traditions to preserve the dead. Okay, there's another fact about mummies. There are more than 1,000 mummies in China. There's another. And over 1 million found in Egypt. Many of these are cats. So you have a list of facts, a list of descriptions about these mummies found throughout the world. Okay? Now when you have enumeration and listing, as for each of these organizational patterns, I'm going to show you some key words, some words that you might see in these passages. And over on the right, they just popped in. In this specific passage, there aren't too many of these, but these are some words you might see. Appears to be, looks like, first, to begin with, then, next, is, or it gives you a list of facts. And that's basically what I want you to be able to identify, that list of facts. And that's enumeration and listing. So in that first row on your worksheet, you have all of this. Okay, hopefully you filled in your definition. Okay, let's go on to our next type. Our next one is called concept and definition. And if a passage is written in concept and definition, okay, now you're in your second row here. Fill in the part that's blank with the red. The purpose of the passage is to define a concept using appropriate supporting details. Now, this type of organizational pattern is actually a lot like enumeration and listing, but I want you to know how they're different. Enumeration and listing takes some topic, some idea, something, and describes it or gives an explanation of it. Mummies, okay? A concept. The word concept is a little bit difficult. It's a big idea. These are not things you can touch. They're just big ideas. So if a passage seems to be about an idea and explaining what that idea is, giving a definition of that idea, just think, in enumeration and listing, it's usually something you could touch. You could touch a mummy if you were near one. But concept and definition is about ideas and what they mean. So it's a little difficult, but we're going to do some practice with it. So, here's our practice passage. One purpose of mummification is to preserve the body for the travel to the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians believed that the afterlife was a heavenly place, complete with a heavenly Nile River. The ancient Egyptians called this heavenly place the land of two fields. All right, now when you read this, can you figure out what the concept is that they define? There's a big idea here, and then they spend some time in this paragraph explaining what it is. All right, the idea is the afterlife. Travel to the afterlife. The rest of the paragraph, they explain what the afterlife is. Could you touch the afterlife? No. It's just an idea. It's a big idea. So what is the afterlife? The afterlife was a heavenly place, and you should be highlighting this, by the way, in your box. Underline it, highlight it, but so you can see the specific parts that make this a concept and definition. Please do that for each of these examples. It has a heavenly Nile River, and they call this place the land of two fields. Okay? There is the definition of the Egyptian afterlife. Some keywords that you might see in concept and definition. Something is, for example, the word defined, an actual example of what it is, the phrase one reason, or the phrase in addition. All those things might be in there. Okay? Concept and definition. Okay, our third internal organizational pattern is called compare-contrast. This is the one we looked at earlier. Make sure you're in your third row, and the red goes, you need to fill in the red part here. The purpose of the passage is to show similarities and differences between two topics. Now, if I'm going too fast, remember you can stop the video, you can rewind the video, you can replay the video, you can pause the video, but you do need to get this filled in before you move on to the next activity, okay? So compare contrast. Although the first mummies were probably accidental, mummification became an art in Egypt. While members of the noble classes were mummified, poor people usually were not. Now, this is a very small passage, and the compare and contrast is only a very small part of it, because I showed you the one with the cat and the dog. So I just did a real small one. So what's compared and contrasted? How mummies are different, or how some people are mummies and some people are not, right? Noble classes were mummified, poor people were not. So what's being compared and contrasted? Who becomes a mummy? You see two things compared and contrasted. Not the greatest example, but you saw a very good example with the cats and the dogs. You will almost always see some of these keywords in compare contrast. The word similar, the words difference, the word both, compared with, while, and you see while in there, although, however, and alike. You see the word while, and you see the word while. Okay, our next one is called chronological or sequential. This is all about time. The purpose of the passage is to show the time order in which events occurred. Time order. Now, they might use, if you were being quizzed or tested, you might see the word chronological and you might see the word sequential. You might see both together, but they mean the same thing. Sequence in time order. Chrono. The word chrono, the root means time. We've talked about that before. All right, let me read this passage to you. In 1896, British archaeologist William Flinders Petrie began using X-ray techniques to examine mummies without wrapping them. In the early 1970s, scientists began using computer tomography, or CAT scans, to create images of the inside of mummies. This aided them in determining information about the embalming and wrapping processes the Egyptians used. Okay, so time. I had the first one highlighted there. Dates. Dates are often a way to show chronological order or sequential order. It's time. It's not always date. It might be a time period. Early Egyptians. It might be time in a day. At 8 o'clock in the morning I went to school. At 12 o'clock I had lunch. At 3 o'clock I went home. At 7 o'clock I had basketball practice. 9 o'clock I did my homework and I was in bed by 11. That could be chronological too. So it could mean a lot of things. But in this example, we're talking about dates. And that is a very common keyword that you'll see would be key type thing or dates. But you might see different times. You might see the word first or second or meanwhile or after or before. But if it seems like a passage you could put on a timeline, then it's chronological sequential. A lot of history, a lot of your history book is in chronological sequential order. Okay? All right, our next one is cause and effect. The purpose of the passage is to show the cause and the effect or outcome of one event. A lot of science things are cause and effect. Something causes, there's a cause, and then there's something that happens. So let's take a look here at the example. Because the Incas lived in the high Andes where it was very cold, they created ice mummies that were preserved in the thin, frigid mountain air. Again, this is a very short passage, but you see a cause, because the Incas lived in the high Andes, where it was very cold. Those are mountains, the high Andes. Because they lived there, they created ice mummies. Because of the temperature, they did this. That was the outcome. They found a way to preserve bodies because it was cold. A cause and an effect. And a lot of science is written in a cause and effect format. Keywords, and again, keywords are very important in cause and effect. As a result, caused by, the effects of, due to, reasons for, consequently, and because. And there is because right there. Okay, you see that in there. Because of this, then this happened. So cause and effect. That's usually a pretty easy one to identify. This is another easy one to identify. It's called process. Again, make sure you fill in your definition. The purpose of the passage is to explain the steps of how something occurs from beginning to end. So it's a step-by-step passage, something that shows you something that happens step by step. A recipe, for instance, would be a process organizational pattern. All right, so here is an example. The first step in the mummification process was to remove all of the internal organs. Next, the embalmer drained the body of fluids. Finally, the body was wrapped in linens. Yeah, I know it's kind of a gross paragraph, but it tells the process of making a mummy, right? And you see the first step, and then you see next, and then you see finally. Those are all the steps. And those are keywords. And again, in this process organizational pattern, you will almost always see these keywords because that's what the process is all about. What you do first, what you do next, what you do finally. Please don't get this confused with chronological. This is a step-by-step process, whereas chronological has to do with time order, not step-by-step. Okay? The last one is generalization, and this is one you almost will never see. So we're really not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want you to see it. In a generalization paragraph, the purpose of the text is to organize information into general statements with supporting details. So if it just feels like it's kind of all over the place, and there's a topic, and there's just a bunch of kind of very general statements, kind of all over the place about it, it's generalization. I don't want you to think about this one too much. We don't often see it. So you see your paragraph here. All mummies are always scary. They are wrapped in white cloth. They show up in horror movies. For example, they hunt people because they are dead. These are all just really big statements about mummies. Very, very general. It doesn't get very specific about this. Again, fill in that definition. I don't want you to underline anything in there, and I don't want you to worry too much about generalization. But some words you might see: always, never, in fact, for example, and for instance. Okay? All right, there are your 7 patterns. Now I want you to watch part 2 of this video to try some examples.